me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scallion, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. Hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. You touch up line and a resort to crime. You can't fool me again.
What we gonna eat no money, what we at you, eat no at you. Covid money, miss you, we eat the your little rat you. Use the youth, the money, waste and bust a man to statue. Say me like a cash you, but me got in a figure you. Take this spit of money, gal and say that is not you. On the head, the man above him, him a got a bet. Too much it in the kitchen, some a fly well like a patu. When singers and DJs and social media's coming at you.
It burn me.
300% raise.
It burn me.
Garbage pile up the day.
It burn me.
Give the teacher them raise.
It burn me.
I see corruption face.
It burn me.
Mash down the people them house.
It burn me.
Every day appear arms out.
It burn me.
Appear money them a thief.
It burn me.
And them a sell out with each.
Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scallion, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. You touch up line and a resort to crime. You can't fool me again.
For me say big up all the charities and all of the givers. Some a go like say them powerful, me no make a bigger. The already promises, none of them not deliver. Cut up the youth, they rap and they down in our fever. Member bold money and they lie them tell. Corruption smell and they pocket them swell. When police don't a market like Satan out of hell, go mash up people start like thief when them sell.
It burn me.
Or they treat the market man.
It burn me.
Or them a treat the cat man.
It burn me.
Or they treat the peanut man.
It burn me.
Or them a treat the jerk man.
It burn me.
Or them a treat the son man.
It burn me.
Or them a treat policeman.
It burn me.
Or them a treat soldier man.
It burn me.
How them a treat everyone.
Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scallion, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't.
What for bun mark golden, no bun mark golden? What for hot mark golden, no hot mark golden? Good evening. Welcome to a Sunday evening outside of London. Thank you for joining us. Just a wake up and the voice not sound too well enough, but we still going to jump and go on. And my ears back fill up on the screen. Good evening to all my lovely viewers and subscribers. Good evening to all my globalists. Thank you very much for being here. This issue in our country, we will do all we can to keep it in the spotlight in order to prevent politicians and police from destroying the evidence and in the end destroying the case, because there's a lack of evidence and we cannot place such man on the crime scene. So we can't go to a trial. And remember, the DPP is quite easy. It's quite easy to be controlled. Good evening, Bobby Montague. Good evening to Bobby Montague. What I want to say to Mr. Golden, because I'm going to get right into it, I'm not going to linger nor dance. Let us use the scale of justice this evening, Mark Golden. You are a lawyer. Though you may have a specialty as a commerce lawyer, but let's blindfold Lady Justice this evening, Mark Golden. and apply justice to downtown, justice to uptown, and justice to the fast approaching, eradicating middle or middle upper class Jamaica. Let's apply the scale of justice. How are we going to balance the scale of justice this evening? We are going to compare and contrast two members of the National Party and incidents and hope to weigh the scale of justice. Earlier this year, on Partner Jar TV, a lot of us, if any of you are here from Partner Jar TV, which some of you ought to be, you are aware of the situation with Isaac Buchanan and the issue of free speech, which uptown Jamaica went berserk. It is that very incident in which Mark Golden distanced himself publicly from Isaac Buchanan on that issue and make a statement, and Isaac had to go. Isaac was the chair of the human rights sector for the People's National Party. It was in their eye such a horrible thing that Isaac had to go. That was free speech. Jolyan Silvera, of recent, has been very, very close to Mark Golden. My understanding, if it is correct, he's possibly a member of Mark Golden's security team. If not, he has been a member of Mark Golden's close team because he has been seen in crowd with Mark Golden quite regular, sometime holding up an umbrella over Mark Golden. On the 11th of November, we learn of the death of his wife in her sleep. This Friday, we learn it wasn't so. Even if she died in her sleep, she died from gunshot wounds. The narrative was put out until Friday that she died in her sleep. Has anyone since Friday seen Mark Golden making any further statement in public? This is a murder investigation versus an investigation against free speech. Free speech versus murder. How long is it going to take Mark Golden to come out, make a statement, distance himself from Jolyan Silvera? Otherwise, Mr. Golden, this would be seen as uptown justice. It different for them uptown from them downtown. So Mark Golden need to come out and make a statement, a further statement, as well as distancing himself. I'm going to speak language where people are rather more comfortable with. Distancing himself from an alleged murderer. Distancing himself from an alleged murderer. Because while the autopsy report shows that Mrs. Silvera died from gunshot wound, she ought to have received those multiple gunshots from someone else. It can't be suicide. Fitzbailey is not saying suicide. Fitzbailey is saying homicide. Homicide is the unlawful killing of another human being. If not Mr. Silvera, who pulled the trigger that ended Mrs. Silvera's life? Who is helping Jolyan Silvera financially to retain his legal counsel? His legal counsel, Peter Champagne. But was Valerie Nita not the counsel in the first instance? Was Valerie Nita not of the view that she died from an aneurysm? If that is the case, where would Miss Nita have gotten that information from? Or would Miss Nita be just going on the blind information that seemingly, as what they want us to believe, the blind information that everybody was going on from Mr. Silvera, that Mrs. Silvera died in her sleep? How close is Bobby Montague to Jolyan Silvera? Is Bobby Montague assisting Mr. Silvera financially to retain a legal counsel? Just asking by in passing. I said earlier today, motive is not my issue. It is for the police. But because we don't want them to throw this case up and out like a lot they have done, I am going to go into the conspiracy land of motives, or in this case, motive. Mrs. Silvera's mother died on the 6th of May this year, from my understanding. It was said she had cancer, from my understanding. It is also my understanding that Melissa Silvera is an only child to Leslie Davis. Them people are a long time up the road uptown people. Come on. These people are going to have life insurance. You can almost be certain that Leslie Davis had a life insurance, and Melissa Silvera, being the only child, would be the beneficiary of that policy. Normally, when in such, an insurance policy would be paid out within 3 to 6 months. Remember, this is conspiracy line of motive. The question then begs to ask, was there also an insurance policy on Mrs. Silvera? Them are uptown people, so we are going to assume, because downtown people and ghetto people have life insurance now. Let's assume there's also an insurance policy within the Silvera's family. If that is the case, and this stitch up and cover up would have just happened to fall through, the technician who did the postmortem didn't go along with the already cover up. So in my view, this is how it all come to public, because we can assume from the morning of the 11th of November, there has been a string of people or officials that has been assisting Mr. Silvera in the cover-up of his wife's murder. Assume there's an insurance policy within the Silvera's household. And this stitch up and cover up fall through, Mrs. Silvera is buried and no alarm is being raised. Couldn't one then argue that this would be a financial double whammy for Mr. Silvera? The conspiracy motive even explore further. Was there an insurance policy within the Silvera household in 2017 when 2-year-old Silvera was drowned? When 2-year-old Silvera died from drowning, was there an insurance policy at the time? It was round about those times, like a year or months after Mr. Silvera has lost his seat, when Andrew Holness took over the reins from Portia Simpson in 2016. Was there an insurance payout from the passing of Mrs. Silvera's mother? Mrs. Silvera is an only child. Was there a life insurance policy in the Silvera's household? Could this be a murder for financial gain on the part of Mr. Silvera? How did Mr. Silvera, 2-year-old, really die? Was 2-year-old Silvera drowned, or was it just a successful cover-up? Was there an insurance payout for 2-year-old Silvera in 2017-18? It turns out that Mrs. Silvera has been murdered. How long will it take Mark Golden to make a statement and distance himself publicly from Mr. Silvera? Because I guarantee you, it's going to destroy you politically. I am telling you from now, Mark Golden, the longer you take to distance yourself from Silvera, the longer you take to put a clarified statement in public on this matter, there is a political destruction coming. This guy has been seen with you of recent on several occasions. You were one of the very first to come out and give your condolences. It turned out what we were told is not so. The faster you make a statement, the better in the long term. Was Mr. Silvera an abusive husband? Was Mr. Silvera an abusive husband? One would have drawn that inference in the fact that unless there's a mental health issue, a man doesn't oopsie-daisy just get up overnight and become violent to the point where in their bedroom, his wife died from multiple gunshot wounds. How long has Mr. Silvera been abusive? Was Mrs. Silvera killed for financial gain? Was Mrs. Silvera having an affair? Did Mrs. Silvera found out about any odd sexual habits, behavior, lifestyle of Mr. Silvera? Why was Mr. Silvera confident that he would have gotten away with such a crime within his family, within his household? This is why it is bothering me. Were the children in the residence on the night of the 10th of November? Did he shot his wife, or was his wife shot while the children were in the house? There are people who are close to me who from the 11th, 12th of November have been trying to contact Mr. Silvera. Why Mr. Silvera don't want to talk to anyone? Is there a reason why Mr. Silvera is tight-lipped? Was there a reason why Mr. Silvera retained a lawyer even before Friday? Fitzbailey, the Commissioner of Police, a public statement for update and clarification is required on the matter. Let me tell you why. This involves state operatives, politicians, and police. We're dealing with a string of cover-ups. But I want to ask a question. And I hope this is something that Fitzbailey can answer, because if this happens, this is a very important piece of puzzle or brick that would show that the investigators knew more than what they led on the 11th of September. Does Mr. Silvera have a licensed firearm? If Mr. Silvera, we're going to assume he has a licensed firearm because he's a politician and them come from uptown, so that is already a clarifying factor and eligibility to get firearm. Them rich and them come from uptown, plus them a politician. You don't really need to put more on the paper. Y'all go get licensed firearm. Is it true, Fitzbailey, from my understanding, that the police who are, your team of police who attended, whether be on the night of the 10th or on the morning of the 11th of November, took away Mr. Silvera's licensed firearm? If that is so, Fitzbailey, on what reason was Mr. Silvera licensed firearm removed on the 10th or 11th, the night of the 10th, or the morning of the 11th of November? Why was the reason, if Mr. Silvera licensed firearm has been removed, when was it removed, and for what reason when it has been removed? Let's explore on the argument that his licensed firearm was removed. If that is so, what was the reason why the police removed his firearm? If the police believe, remember, this is conspiracy motive. If the police believe the narrative that Mrs. Silvera died in her sleep, and it is true, what would be the reason for the police confiscating Mr. Silvera's licensed firearm. What would have brought the police to that? What presented to the officer on entering the bearer's licensed firearm? If the police remove Mr. Silvera's firearm on the 10th or on the 11th, or any time after the alleged death of the death of his wife, then one could argue that then from the 11th of November, the police would have known that Mrs. Silvera did not die in her sleep. What's the correlation of a peaceful death and the removal of a licensed firearm? Okay, let me argue here in Mr. Silvera's favor. Mr. Silvera is a licensed firearm holder. Mr. Silvera has just woken up to find his wife dead next to him. Mr. Silvera is quite much in an unstable mind at the moment. He's suffering the shock and trauma of the passing of his wife. Coupled with that, he's still reliving live trauma from the death of his son in 2017. So the police could just well be thinking of extended public protection and protection of Mr. Silvera and his family, so they are removing a potential danger. But if the police remove the firearm, is that the real reason why the police remove Mr. Silvera's firearm? Fitz-Bailey need to answer the question as to whether Mr. Silvera's firearm has been removed and for what reason was it removed. What caused the police concern to remove Mr. Silvera's firearm? If it wasn't for the fact that when the police went to the Silvera's 11th, that they walked into a crime scene that would have caused them to take away his licensed firearm, what would be the reason? We know there is a crime. We know there is a cover-up. What we want to do is to unearth that which who commit the crime, and subsequently those who assist in the covering up of the crime. Did Mr. Silvera summon a doctor to the property on the morning of the 11th of November? Who pronounced Mrs. Silvera dead? Who removed Mrs. Silvera's body from the crime scene? Because those people are involved in the cover-up of a crime. Tomorrow morning, Monday morning, we should receive 2 press conferences. 2 press conferences ought to happen tomorrow morning. Fitz-Bailey and the Commissioner of Police ought to have a press conference informing us of the recent development. Tell us the turn and the direction the investigation is moving into. Who are you investigating? Why is Mr. Silvera not arrested in any part on this globe other than Jamaica? Mr. Silvera would have been arrested from the 12th of November. However, let's say Mr. Silvera tricked all of us before the autopsy on his wife. Why, since Friday, or since Fitzbailey is aware of the development, Mr. Silvera is not been arrested and in custody? If it's a child of the Silvera's household that accidentally used their parents' gun and may have plainly or accidentally shot Miss Silvera, if that is the reason why Mr. Silvera is not a suspect, as his counsel would have us believe, then please let us know that it was an accidental shooting by one of the children. How would that stand up to 5 weeks of lying in public? Because Mr. Silvera cannot come and tell us that I knew nothing of gunshot wounds until the autopsy says so. Because Mrs. Silvera was not shot outside of her bedroom. It is the reason why significant renovation, as Nationwide has been reporting, has been done to the Silvera's bedroom. So unless him drag her out of the bedroom on the morning of the 11th, the first responders who went to the bedroom, both those who pronounce her dead and those who remove her body from the crime scene, started to assist, started assisting Mr. Silvera in one of the gravest cover-up of our time. At least Amai Issa has done her staging a little bit more sensible, even though it was a shaky, dubious story from the start, given the vehicle she was driving. But Amai Issa's story would have even sound more convincing. Why? Because from day that Amai Issa make we know say a murder fear picking a murder. Who is the murderer is yet to be explored, while Amai Issa is been blocking the exploration of who murdered her child. But you, Mr. Silvera, you didn't cocked up a story to tell us you came home to find your wife dead. You were so confident of your act, or you were in such a rage. You were in such a rage that good thought and conscience went out the window. So Mr. Silvera cannot come to us and tell us he didn't know that his wife had gunshot wound. Mr. Silvera deliberately lied to us. Like Andre Stevens, for the last 5 weeks, Mr. Silvera has been playing on and has been receiving public sympathy at home and in the diaspora. How long have you been abusive to your wife, Mr. Silvera? How long have you been an abusive husband? But people don't just get up overnight and turn murderer. People wife don't just get multiple gunshots next to them. How much story is the Silvera's resident? How deep is the basement in the Silvera's resident that Mrs. Silvera could be shot multiple times? And Mr. Silvera in the house saw nor heard anything. The gunmen were careful that there were no external bleeding. Or if there was external bleeding, the gunman was so timely that they cleaned up Mrs. Silvera before Mr. Silvera woke out of bed to find his wife dead in her sleep. It is what Mr. Silvera expects us to believe, that his wife died peacefully in her sleep. Why would Mr. Silvera allow this narrative in public for 5-6 weeks? Why does Council Champagne not want us to explore these issues? Why Peter Champagne would want us to stand aside with a shut lip? Why Peter Champagne wouldn't want us to ask questions of Mr. Silvera's actions? Was the 2-year-old really drowned in 2017? Or was it a successful cover-up of the drowning death of 2-year-old Silvera? Was there any insurance payout on the death of 2-year-old Silvera? Was Mrs. Silvera murdered for her mother insurance money? Are we going to allow this one to get thrown under the carpet after a few weeks? Remember the investigating officer. The investigating officer, Fitz Bailey, who have taken over the investigation, is a liar. Reverend Fitz Bailey is a liar. Reverend Fitz Bailey is a corrupt public official. Reverend Fitz Bailey is a corrupt police. It was a few moons ago this same Fitzbailey, with the knowledge that Reverend Moore was murdered, this same Fitzbailey, with the knowledge that Reverend Orville Moore, was murdered, possibly a state assassination, and that same Fitzbailey, with the knowledge of a postmortem report that the government pathologists and the independent pathologists is saying from the same page on that report, Fitzbailey came in public and deliberately lied to us that there is no foul play in the death of Orville Moore. This is the same Fitzbailey we're dealing with. It is the same corrupt official we are dealing with. Let's not give them time to throw it under the carpet. This was the reason why Mr. Silvera was given 5 weeks by his police friends or the police he paid off. Give me enough time to destroy the evidence. Give me enough time to destroy the evidence. In the nationwide report, it is said that significant renovation, that means most of the room has had changes done to it. Significant. Redecoration, meaning a lot of changes had been done to the room since the 11th of November. This is not just tampering with evidence, this is destroying evidence. Destroying the evidence. If Mr. Silvera's licensed firearm was seized, has it been sent off for ballistic tests? Nation at home, you must demand a press conference from the government and the opposition tomorrow. On the government side, the Commissioner of Police and Fitzbailey need to address the public on this matter and give an update as to what they know and who we are investigating. Mark Golding must come out and make a further statement and distance himself from Mr. Silvera. It wasn't hard to distance yourself from Isaac Buchanan's comment. This is abuse turned murder. Gone overboard cover-up. What did Mark Golding knew before Friday? Was Mark Golding privy to any information before Friday that Mrs. Silvera was murdered? Was Mark Golden privy to any information before this Friday that Mrs. Silvera has been murdered? All these are important for Mark Golden to come and tell us. All these are important for Mark Golden to come and tell us. It was Mark Golden in the opening of Parliament. Was it earlier this year or was it earlier this year? When George Wright, after the Labour dispelled him from the camp, from their camp for beating his common law with a stool in public, he was walking with the People's National Party camp or more closer to them, and Mark Golden rebuked him. Why has Mark Golden not come out since Friday and give further clarity? Mark Golden, Jolyan Silvera, is a close ally to Mark Golden. He has been seen quite regular out and about with the leader of the opposition. We're waiting for those two statements, and we're not going to drop this issue. We're going to continue to question this matter. We're going to keep it in the headline. Mr. Silvera, in passing, let me ask you a question. You're not any friends of Dr. Sandra Nesbitt, are you? I'm just asking. It wouldn't be Dr. Sandra Nesbitt. It would be Dr. Sandra Nesbitt that you call to pronounce the death of your wife in her sleep. I'm just asking. There's no evidence to suggest such. I'm just asking. But we are going to stay on this PP clock. This is murder and cover-up. And this involves politicians. It involves law enforcement. The murder involves politicians. The cover-up involves law enforcement. A cover-up, if you do not know, is worse than the crime itself. The covering up of a crime is worse than the crime itself. In this instant, a homicide, a murder of a mother, a woman, a wife, in her bedroom, almost certainly by her husband. The question that one is asking, were the children in the residence on the night of the 10th of November? Did Mr. Silvera shot and kill his wife in the house with the children? These are my questions this evening. We are going to continue to badger away at this issue. I wonder why mainstream media is not taking this issue to task. Why is mainstream media not taking this issue to task? But we are waiting for Mark Golden and Fitz Bailey. It is important that those two address the nation 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Jamaica time. Fitz Bailey and Mark Golden separately should address the country by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. This is a cover of a state crime where politician seemingly is involved in the committing of the crime. And further, law enforcement is assisting politicians in covering up the crime. By tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, Mark Golden and Fitz Bailey should update the nation in separate press conferences. Is Mr. Silvera a danger to the public on loose? While Mr. Silvera has not been arrested, is Mr. Silvera a danger to the public? Is Mr. Silvera a danger to his children? Is Mr. Silvera a danger to his children? We're going to continue to ask these questions. We must not stop answering these questions. But let me do a few big up before I run tonight. I want to big up all of my fans who are here. Thank you very much for being here. I want to do a special big up to my moderators, to my cousin Jamie Too Cool, Debbie Jervis, Beat and Teach, Sunshine, S17 MMA. Thank you very much for keeping the comment area steady and keeping the phrenologist at bay. Thank you all very much for that hard work. I really appreciate it because I really don't have time to focus on the comment area because you all know the truth is whatever people want to say in the comments don't really get to me. I understand the rules of comment because people can say defamatory things, libelous things in there, or very disrespectful things. I don't mind, to be honest, people's speech don't really get to me. But thank you all very much for holding the fort. Jamaica Carlos, big up yourself. You're always here as a fellow blogger. Shelly Coran, as well, you're always here as a fellow blogger. Big up yourself. Jamaica on Politics Uncovered, you are here as a next, you're always here as the next blog as well. Big up yourself. I haven't seen Head Teacher K and Legit tonight. They're always here as fellow bloggers as well. Big up yourselves. Thank you very much for the support. We are going to continue to ask questions until the cows come home. The reason why our society is where it's at is because of dirty politics, corruption, and lack of accountability. We've sat down for years since our so-called independence. We have continued to let our politicians slip further and further, using our country like it's an island that they have paid for, like it's their private island. And I'm going to say this, and I will continue to say this until, big up cousin Myrna Brian Bennett, how are you? Until Jamaicans at home decide enough is enough. We're going to have peaceful demonstrations. We're going to strike peacefully. We're going to stay home peacefully. But we're going to show the government that this is not business as usual. Until Jamaicans at home decide that enough is enough, the same old will happen. Because they do it once and get away with it, twice and get away with it, and it becomes a perpetual line of doing it because we know we can get away with it. Doing it because we know we can get away with it. There wasn't a break-in and entry at the Silvera's residence. So one could fairly assume that Mr. Silvera murdered his wife. Why is Mr. Silvera not in police custody? Especially since Friday's report. Why is Mr. Silvera not in police custody? If Mr. Silvera was from rural Jamaica, if Mr. Silvera was from Western Kingston, would Mr. Champagne be telling us not to cast aspersion on Mr. Silvera? Or not to question whether Mr. Silvera could have shot his wife, if not anybody else? While you have no suspect, Mr. Champagne, we have to look at the closest to the crime scene. We have to look at the closest to the crime scene. And if Mr. Silvera's licensed firearm was taken off him, we need to know who took it off him and why they did so. Did an officer remove Mr. Silvera's firearm because they've realized they've walked into a crime scene? Was it just about any officer went to the Silvera's residence, or Silvera called particular friends of his? If a doctor went to the Silvera's residence to pronounce Mrs. Silvera dead, who was that doctor? Is it a friend of Mr. Silvera, or is it the family doctor? Who shot and killed Mrs. Silvera, if not her husband? If not Mr. Silvera, who shot and killed Mrs. Silvera in her bed while there was no break-in and entry to the Silvera's residence? So if there was no break-in and entry, Peter Champagne, and the government pathologist is saying Mrs. Silvera received multiple, not one, not two, at least 3 gunshot wounds. At least 3 gunshot wounds. Is it Mr. Silvera or one of the children who shot and killed Mrs. Silvera? Let me say this, Mr. Silvera. until you come out and clear this up, I am willing to drag your children through the mud by questioning whether one of them have shot their mother. Save your children from this, Mr. Silvera. Because Peter Champagne has said, you're not a suspect. If you're not a suspect, it could be legitimate that you're trying to protect a child who may have done an awful thing by accident or willfully. If you don't want your child or children, Mr. Silvera, to be dragged through this mess, clear the air. But if you killed their mother, would you have any much compassion for them? If they are going through trauma at the moment, and the consequences of the trauma is the actions of their dad, would you be really thinking about them at this moment? Who shot and killed Mrs. Silvera? If not Mr. Silvera, or one of the Silvera's children, who shot and killed Melissa Silvera? This is Sunday night. Thank you very much for being here. I will be back on this issue tomorrow. We are not going to drop it. We're not going to give you all a chance to bury more. Mark Golden, we are watching you. We are watching Mark Jefferson Golden on this issue. Debbie, it is so true, and a lot of people are saying there are so many questions arising from this whole issue. And the police are handling it like they don't have a duty to come and speak to us. They're acting like they don't have a duty to come and speak to us. One of us have been murdered. And those who we employ to protect us is covering it up. Mark Golden, I guarantee you, if you're not out by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, you're going to be in some hot political mess. Take my advice, Mark Golden. Take in front of the camera by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Robert. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to aim to do 2 programs because I have some personal admins to take care of tomorrow. I will aim to do a midday UK time, which will be like 5. No, I want to do it a bit later. I want to go for 2-3 o'clock UK time. What that is, that's about 8-9 o'clock in Jamaica. Please don't quote me on figures. You know, when it comes to numbers, I can't do calculation. But I'm going to do a show tomorrow, 2 to 3 o'clock UK time. And then my usual 11 o'clock PM UK time. You all have to work it out on your time. And remember me a national dunce when it comes to numbers. So the calculation now go accurate for me, but work it out. I'm 5 hours ahead, and 3 p.m. UK time and 11 p.m. UK time. So thank you all very much. Thank you. I'm going to go off to my bed now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, like and share this live, please. If you are here and you have not yet subscribed, please do so. We are the social justice frontier. We are here to make sure we speak up for people's rights. We make sure we keep you informed and educated. So click the notification bell so as soon as we set a live, or if we're putting out a pre-recorded video, you'd be one of the first to receive our notification. So thank you. Thank you very much. Head teacher K, you seem to just arrive when we leave. But as much of us in the blogging community, let us keep this issue alive. If we're serious about crime and corruption in our country, this is one issue that we must stand tall on. Just like we all stood tall on the Donnelly situation, this is something we ought to stood tall on. This involves politician, and police assisting in the cover-up of a crime. This is something we need to all keep our ears and eyes close to and do not allow them. They have been given enough time by the police to destroy, clean up and destroy evidence to the point where rooms have been redecorated within the last 5 weeks, from the 12th of November to Friday. Room has gone under significant renovation. The police has allowed that cover. And if the police remove Mr. Silvera's licensed firearm, in a press conference, Fitzbailey must tell us what if his firearm has been removed and why the police took the decision to remove his firearm. Was it that the police realized on the 12th of November that they've walked into an active crime scene, why they would have moved Mr. Silvera's firearm? Or if Mr. Silvera's firearm was removed, was it removed on the assumption that Mr. Silvera is not in a stable mind at the moment and could possibly hurt himself or the children or a member of the public? Good night. We're going to continue this discussion. I will see you tomorrow.